And folks, we have some breaking news just into the Golf Channel headquarters on this Monday. In response to Brooks Koepka's application for reinstatement to the PGA Tour, the Tour has announced today that he will be eligible to play on the PGA Tour once again. The Tour is creating what they call a returning member program, which is designed to offer a path back to the Tour to elite performers who no longer have contractual limitations preventing them from complying with PGA Tour rules and regulations. The Tour also calling this a unique set of circumstances. So here is what the returning member program entails. A player must have been away from the PGA Tour for at least 2 years, won the Players, the Masters, PGA, U.S. Open, or the Open between 2022 and 2025, must comply with PGA Tour regulations, and must apply for reinstatement between January 12th and February 2nd, 2026. Financial penalties. Ineligible for equity through PGA Tour equity program for 5 years. Ineligible for 2026 FedEx Cup bonus program. Must pay $5 million in charitable donation. Playing opportunities. Fields will be expanded to accommodate returning players. Returning players must earn spots in signature events through the Aon Next 10 and Aon Swing 5 or be inside the top 30 on the official World Golf ranking and not eligible for sponsor exemptions. A full field win would secure spots into signature events. And returning players are eligible for FedEx Cup playoffs will be incremental to the field. This statement from the now former LIV golfer, the 5-time major champion Brooks Koepka. I want to thank my family and my team for their continued support throughout every step of my professional career. When I was a child, I always dreamed about competing on the PGA Tour, and I am just as excited today to announce that I am returning to the PGA Tour. Being closer to home and spending more time with my family makes this opportunity especially meaningful to me. On returning to the PGA Tour, he said, I believe in where the PGA Tour is headed with new leadership, new investors, and an equity program that gives players a meaningful ownership stake. I also understand there are financial penalties associated with this decision, and I accept those. Finally, I want to thank the fans. Your support means more to me today than ever before. I look forward to seeing you soon at the Farmers Insurance Open and WM Phoenix Open. He also wrote a letter to PGA Tour membership. Pardon me, this is from PGA Tour CEO Brian Rolap. I want to share an overview of the returning member program, which formally opened today following approval from our player majority boards. This initiative is a direct response to a unique situation. On December 23, 2025, Brooks Koepka notified the PGA Tour that his previous affiliation had concluded, and he subsequently applied for reinstatement of Tour membership. This prompted the boards to evaluate how best to respond in a way that serves our fans, players, and partners. Rolap continued, in evaluating the situation, our objectives were clear. Make the PGA Tour stronger, preserve playing opportunities for current members, and deliver on fan desire to see the best players in the world back on our tour, while ensuring returning members must accept severe yet appropriate financial consequences. We recognize there may be questions about how this policy holds a returning player accountable, especially after earning substantial compensation elsewhere. Ultimately, by accepting membership in the returning member category, Brooks Koepka is making the decision to return to the PGA Tour now, something our fans want, and something that strengthens both the game and our organization. The returning member program ensures that only those who have recently achieved the highest accomplishments in the game are eligible to return to the PGA Tour, where the best players in the world compete, week in and week out. This is a one-time, defined window and is not a precedent for future situations. Once the door closes, there is no promise that this path will be available again. Best, Brian Rolap, CEO of the PGA Tour. Damon Hack and Eamon Lynch with you. Your reaction to this breaking news?
I think it's what has always been inevitable from the PGA Tour standpoint. So much of the conversation, even from guys first going to LIV back in 2022, the focus has always been on what would be the punishment if a guy wanted to come back. It was never really on what was the opportunity that would present itself from a guy wanting to come back. And that's what the players on the PGA Tour's board have focused on here. It's understandable that people want to see sanctions, and that's why you see the financial penalties in this, where Brooks Koepka will not be eligible for any kind of equity grant on the PGA Tour for the next 5 years. If he qualifies for the FedEx Cup playoffs this year, he's not eligible for any bonus payment there. So there are financial penalties in there, but the PGA Tour is being opportunistic in this situation, realizing that they are balancing the punishment versus the politics. They want to strengthen their own tour. They want to either weaken LIV or create the perception that LIV has been weakened in some respect. And they also want to send a signal to other guys, and it's very artfully constructed here in terms of who is eligible for this. You have to have won a major or the players during these 4 years when LIV has been in existence. Well, there are only 4 guys who qualify for that, and one of them is Brooks Koepka, who's going to play on the PGA Tour in 2 weeks. The other 3 are Jon Rahm, Cameron Smith and Bryson DeChambeau. It's entirely unclear whether or not any of those guys are going to be in a position to consider taking up the PGA Tour's offer in this one. I'm sure they've all got their contractual obligations. It's not at all clear what or how restrictive those obligations would be. Somehow Koepka has managed to put himself in a position to take advantage of this, and the Tour has been there to create this kind of pathway for him. But it's also very clear when you see what Roll-Up has done here in terms of anticipating some of the reaction, particularly from a grassroots level. It's important, I suppose, to note what this does not do. It does not take a spot from anyone in the field. It doesn't stop anyone else making the playoffs. It doesn't take their bonus money away if they make the playoffs. It doesn't stop them getting status. They're going to expand the field. If Koepka shows up, they're going to accommodate him in the field. In fact, it's beneficial for some guys because they're going to have to pull a couple of guys off the alternate list to make sure that they've got the correct number of groupings and tee times going out. So he's not going to adversely impact anyone else on the PGA Tour in terms of what guys can do. Guys can still control their own careers by their own clubs, so that there isn't that downside of it, which is something that I think Roll-Up would have been very keen to avoid. Yeah,
especially in this time of shrinking fields, of shrinking PGA Tour membership from 125 to 100. How critical was it that he created a window that was narrow, that was defined? You have from this date, January 12th, to early February to make this decision if you are a Koepka, a Rahm, or a Bryson DeChambeau, or a Cameron Smith, that this is not open to everyone of LIV Golf. It is a player who has a certain pedigree, recent pedigree. And it would only impact the PGA Tour in a positive way. If the PGA Tour is interviewing fans and fans say we want to see the best players in the world competing together, they're talking about a Bryson DeChambeau. They're talking about a Jon Rahm, a Cam Smith, and a Brooks Koepka.
Yeah, and I just talked to Brian Roll-Up just a few minutes before this became very public, and he reiterated why they're doing it. He's got an advantage in the sense that he's fairly new in the PGA Tour. He doesn't carry the baggage of all of the scuffles that broke out over LIV, certainly that marred the Jay Monahan administration as the commissioner. So Roll-Up can look at it from a fresh set of eyes. He's also a business guy. He knows Brooks Koepka is good for business. He knows Bryson DeChambeau would be good for business. It's almost incidental that it would have a negative business impact on a rival league. He's all about building up the equity and value of the PGA Tour. A guy like Brooks Koepka adds to that, as we're going to find out on January 29th when he tees it up at Torrey Pines in San Diego, and the following week in Phoenix, where he's won twice. But Roll-Up reiterated to me why he's doing this. Primarily, it's to make the PGA Tour stronger. He said it's to deliver what fans want to see, but also a key component of it is to protect the existing members who have been loyal, that they would not feel any disadvantage. And obviously the financial penalty is an interesting aspect of it, because the equity grants are, in some ways, some players might dismiss it as almost, it's fantasy money. It's not real money. It doesn't exist. The $5 million Koepka is giving to charity exists. The millions of dollars he might not get in a FedEx Cup bonus certainly is real money as well. But with Roll-Up's business planning, where he's convinced he's taking the PGA Tour, he's very much insistent that that equity will be worth money, and that's equity Brooks Koepka cannot accumulate over the next 5 years until 2030. And by the Tour's own estimate, that's somewhere north of $50 million.
Yeah, deep in the tens of millions of dollars. So for those who would say this is a slap on the wrist, you say no, this is potentially huge money lost for players who left of Brooks's ilk that are coming back to the PGA Tour.
Well, Brooks isn't going to have to get a second job.
No.
Let's rest on that. And thankfully, his wife has been the breadwinner for the few weeks that he's actually been out of work, sitting down there on the couch in Florida. But ultimately, the Tour is looking at this as their business. They are a for-profit business. Are they going to create a situation where they say to a LIV player, a LIV asset of Brooks Koepka's stature, you're welcome back, but you got to sit on the couch for a year, and then we'll have you back. And that's the needle that had to be threaded here by Brian Rowlap, is the desire for punishment from either other members or fans who want to see some form of sanction. But what's realistic, and then at what point does that become counterproductive? Having Koepka sit on the bench for a year is counterproductive, certainly for Brian Rowlap's business. And they have no claim on the money that Brooks Koepka was paid by LIV. I mean, that would be an outlandish thing to say, OK, well, you should give some of that to charity. What they can control is the money that he earns through the PGA Tour. And as sanctions go, that's about as significant a sanction as they're capable of imposing right now. And I mean, I also placed a call to Koepka, and his response is, I have a lot of work to do with the players, one-on-one, but he's going to do that behind closed doors.
Brooks Koepka is 35 years of age. He's a 5-time major champ, grew up in South Florida, attended Florida State, lives in South Florida, in Jupiter. He sees PGA Tour members, sees them not just during the major championship weeks, but in the neighborhood. They belong to the same clubs. What do you think the reaction today will be of a Rory McIlroy, of a Scotty Scheffler, of some of the big names on the PGA Tour, the elite of the elite, who butt heads with Brooks Koepka competitively for the 4 biggest weeks of the year?
I think they'll welcome it in the sense that they've all benefited from what's gone on over the last few years, certainly financially. I think they welcome back having one of the best players of his era with 5 majors coming in. They want to be able to say, well, I beat that guy as well. They want to compete against him on a week-to-week basis. He's going to increase the value of the PGA Tour product in their mind, so he's adding to their bottom line in a sense. But Koepka's probably the best case scenario for Rowlap in terms of having the first guy come back, because he was always popular in the locker room among his peers. And it's really crucial to note that he never became a propagandist for LIV in the sense of, kind of throwing shade at his former colleagues or his former tour. He never played that game, despite the fact that Greg Norman tried to get him to do so. He never did it. Even when he won the PGA Championship, it was a win for him. It wasn't a win for LIV. And the fact that he never litigated, he wasn't part of the antitrust lawsuit, is a really big deal for guys, because we've had Scotty Scheffler on this show saying he wasn't sure about guys coming back who had sued the PGA Tour. And there were over a dozen guys initially signed on to that antitrust lawsuit. Brooks Koepka was never one of them. He was never Greg Norman's patsy in that sense. He went for his reasons, but he didn't dump all over the guys that he was with previously. So I don't think there's going to be a great deal of hostility among his peers in the locker room.
Do you think Brooks Koepka will have company? Bryson DeChambeau, John Rahm, Cam Smith.
It's a question of, do any of those 3 guys want to? And then the question is, can they? And, does Cam Smith look as though he's unhappy on LIV? I think Cam's living the life he wants to live. Bryson's talked about being a YouTube golfer. He's probably going to enjoy the idea that he's got negotiating leverage with LIV going forward now. But even if LIV decided to pay Bryson twice as much to keep him, they're still paying twice as much for what they already have, and it's been proven that what they already have is not enough.
I wonder what the 85th ranked player in the world would think, the 90th player on the FedEx Cup standings. Would they be as happy as Rory today?
Well, they're still going to have to earn their card for next year anyway. And if that person finishes 101st and Brooks is 100th, well, they're still getting their card for 2026. They're getting a free pass on that margin line this year, but they're not getting it next year.